Having a Gas is the podcast that talks the great and the good of the creative industries, and in particular finds out what makes great music for film, for TV, for commercials, for dancing to, for cooking to, for f***ing to, and more. Today I'm having a gas with Cal Hellzen, the Chief Creative Officer at 180 Amsterdam. Cal has a passion for creativity itself, for thinking outside the borders of what's already understood, and he brings this passion to the creative department at 180 and turns it into award-winning work. So that would be the first question, Cal, how have you fostered such a great culture at the agency that people really want to work for you?
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Well, there is a sign that hangs above the door as you walk into the agency, and it says, "Be nice or leave." And I think it kind of speaks to the respect that we have for each other. I mean, at 180, we're about, I think the last time we measured, we were something around 22, 23 different nationalities. A lot of people from different places that kind of look at the agency as its home, away from home, if you will. Mm-hmm. So it's fostered this mentality of, I guess, taking care of each other. And I think that's exciting to people because the industry is difficult. It's not just, I guess, not just this industry, but life is quite hard right now. And I think it's important that people feel safe and feel at home. And hopefully 180 can represent that. And I think we do. So it's not just about the people that come and want to work with us. I think we also have and that's awesome to hear, by the way, but what really is a good measure of that is, of course, the retention, that we don't have a lot of, we haven't had a lot of people leaving. We kind of stick, people tend to stick around and figure out what's next. And a few things that we've done as well over the past, say, 3.5 years since I've been there is that we've hired very little leadership from outside. I'm sure we've hired a few, but we've also made sure that there's room upwards for people inside of the agency, and we've made sure to promote internally rather than just hiring. And I think that kind of fosters a mentality that this is a great place not just to be for a bit, but to hang out at, and hopefully that can help with the hiring as well.
I mean, I hope so. And it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to mention in general, retention and long-term thinking, because it's really been a big feature of many of the discussions I've had on this platform for the last 12 months. There's a lot of concern that on both client side and within agencies, retention is there's not a lot of it. People move on very quickly. A lot of clients on the marketing side move around roughly every 18 months is a stat that I've been given. And of course, the people I know in London move from agency to agency an awful lot. Why do you think that is? And what do you think the disadvantage of that is, if there is one?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've also done it quite a few times. And then you kind of find places that stick with you. They challenge you in the right way. I just think we're curious people, and it's up to us as an industry and as kind of workplaces to satisfy that and to not stagnate and to grow and to have a good time growing. And I mean that as an agency or as a workplace. And if you can do that, then there is something new to kind of discover as you walk through the doors. Perhaps not every day, but you can see that there's interesting things happening. It's not just winning new accounts and growing. It's about, I guess, adapting to the changes of the world in many different ways. And I think it doesn't really necessarily have to be bad. I think some people are, and should be maybe rightly so, impatient when you're young. Like it's such a fine balance. You kind of got to figure it out for yourself in a sense, right? I think there's dangers of being stuck for too long at one place, and then there's dangers in moving too quickly. I think the only one who can really say if it was a good move or not is yourself. But of course, if you look at someone's CV and you see that they've been 9 months or 12 months at every place they've been at, then maybe they should be freelance.
Yeah, it's like an unusual a version of freelancing to continually go around to different places in a permanent position. But the only thing that is permanent is the change. That's the only thing that remains constant, is constantly moving.
Yeah. I mean, I think uncertainty is great. Like uncertainty keeps us on our toes a lot. And I think that's really awesome. And if we knew that everyone would be around every day, then what's the fun in that? Like then you don't have to reinvent yourself or anyone else for that matter. But yeah, it's a difficult question because I don't think there's a right answer. I think it just comes down to the individual and what the individual wants to do. I mean, I started in advertising myself, and then I went to production, and then to the client side, and then back to advertising again. And I think you just got to be curious and figure stuff out. The most important thing though is to make sure that you have a good time, you know. And when you feel like it's not fun anymore, it's really is important to kind of ask yourself why. Is it because of, you know, the situation at work, or is it something else, or whatever it is? And sometimes it's good to shake things up too. So it really comes down to the individual. But it's a really interesting question, actually. It's there is no good advice.
Well, that could be something else to put on the wall. There is no good advice, but I don't know if let's talk about you as the individual for a second, as opposed to the individual as such. What do you do to keep things fun, interesting, rejuvenating things, as opposed to, you know, letting them stagnate and become predictable?
Well, I have been, I guess, questioning a lot of my own motifs and a lot of the reasons why, and the purpose of things, and the why we do what we do and stuff. And I tended to, I call it the banana peel principle, where you kind of, you at least previously in my career when I was younger, it was more about being excited about stuff, right? If it wasn't exciting, then I got ants in my pants and I had to move. And then the banana peel kind of took me somewhere, and you meet someone, you know, or you, for instance, when I was in Sweden, I got my first job, etc. And then I met someone else that started an agency, and I started working with them. And then I felt like, hey, let's go to London, start working in London. We're around in London, and then they called from Amsterdam, and you end up in Amsterdam. And then, you know, I went back to Sweden, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a bar at 4 a.m. And then the next week you're working at a production company. It's like, so I think trust the banana peel a little bit. Like that's at least for me. I think if you plan things too thoroughly, there's a few risks that's associated with it. It's, of course, certainty that you have a plan, but certainty is also really limiting, because the most of the stuff that's exciting, like penicillin, for instance, happens without the plan or outside of the plan. So the banana peel is your friend, you know, like just be open to stuff. And I think now, I mean, when I started out 20 something years ago, like freelance existed, and in Sweden, freelance market was very, very small. Now, of course, there's huge opportunity for freelance, so you don't have to commit in the same way as you needed, perhaps, as well. So, yeah.
It's interesting you were kind of expounding on the idea there that you should endeavor to become friends with what you don't know, and yes, to enjoy not having the plan. I heard something recently that said, if the path ahead of you is clear, it's probably because someone else has already carved it. You're walking someone else's path if you know where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I think that's a lot of what's also troubling with our industry, is that we kind of, we have a map in front of us based on assumptions, data, and insights, and what have you. But that just shows us where we are. It doesn't show us where we need to go. And in order to know where we need to go, to find something new and exciting, we have to kind of go where we haven't been before. And that's a scary thing. And uncertainty is I think there's been some studies around this, but uncertainty is more stressful to people than the knowledge of certain pain, physical pain.
Yeah.
But also uncertainty is the thing that kind of triggers our brain to start to learn things and start to open up to new experiences. So I think find uncertainty really, as a creative at least, it's really important to find uncertainty, and uncertainty can also be created in a safe environment, right? So certainty and uncertainty combined is really exciting. So the certainty of a safe environment where you're respected, there's empathy, we understand each other, or we're trying to understand each other, which is more important than understanding each other, I think. And then be able to create within that. I mean, I think that's really cool. And I usually use that analogy of jazz. It's the same thing in a creative department, I feel, or when you're working with a great partner or in a great team or workshopping with a client. The framework you're setting up is one of safety and certainty, but the only reason that it exists is so that we can take off, our helmets inside of it and just run amok to find something new. And that's the beauty of it. However, if you structure too much so that the path to like a design process, so that we know that the outcome is going to be in a certain way, then you're kind of missing out on innovation and what makes us human, So It's a fine balance, I think, between the two.
I always I'm perpetually fascinated by playing with the idea that creativity obviously is about discovering new things, and you could say breaking boundaries, but necessarily creativity also needs constraints. So for example, if you're a composer of music and you're writing a piano sonata, the piano is the constraint. You can't move over to an oboe or an electric guitar. That's your constraint, is these 88 keys.
Right.
Within those constraints, you have infinite potential, which is demonstrated by the fact that people keep writing more and more music on the piano. It can never be fully discovered, but you need the boundaries.
I mean, you need 3 chords, right? What is it? C, D, G, or whatever. You can write.
Yeah. I mean, that's what a lot of them need. You're kind of describing sort of Oasis there or similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's right. It's like even within the scope of 3 chords, which is like 12-bar blues, how many records did we produce?
It's incredible, right? And so I guess that's the point with using certainty and uncertainty. Certainty is a framework that you put around things to be able to create uncertainty within that. So someone said, listen, I'm so bad with this. Names just keep disappearing from my head at times, but give me the luxury of a tight brief, right? It's the same thing. It's like, here's your instrument, here's your oboe. And so you have to know how to play the oboe in order to make something useful. So that's important, right? So which leads us to the next topic, which in my mind is really important, is craft.
Right.
So you have to know, you have to make stuff, you have to be good at making stuff in order to be able to play within the boundaries of that, or the luxury of that tight certainty, or that tight brief, or the blues that you're trying to create. And it's the same for any artist or any crafts person, really. It might be that your craft is incredibly tight. You might be the guy who carve out little trolls from tree stumps, and that's all you do. But God, those are good trolls,
Yeah.
After a while.
And
so
that's the necessity of discipline, isn't it? So creativity, in a way that might seem like a contradiction, creativity actually thrives on discipline and on, like we were saying, very tight boundaries. And in this, I suppose, you're a designer first, aren't you? That was your initial foray into creativity. And in order to design, you need to learn the rules of design in order to then discover what has not yet been discovered.
Yeah, I think you have to have a point of view on design. I mean, design to me is a foundation principle, which is about friction. It comes down to friction. Design in its purest form is about removing bad friction and adding good friction. That's all there is. And that can be music, that can be graphic design, it can be interface design, it can be a process, it can be anything really. And that's the exciting thing about design as a way of thinking, as a way of being. And then you have the craft of a designer who designs things, which is, sure, I mean, you have to know your tools, you have to, and at 180, I think one of the things that we've been good at 180 is craft. We've been really good at making things that have a level of I guess, craft to them that makes them enjoyable for more than the idea, and for more than they take a shape of their own, if you will. And that's one of the things that I keep hearing a lot when I talk to people. And I think being obsessed with craft is really important, because when you flimse around with ideas, just, you know, I think the English expression is waffling.
Yes.
When you waffle around, right? You waffle around and you come up with a bunch of stuff, but nothing really, you don't really put anything down or you don't develop anything, then that's just a bunch of stuff, right?
Yes.
That no one really cares for. You certainly don't care for it if you don't jot it down and start to craft it. So craft is incredibly important, because if you get quickly to it, you use your creative development process to make quick decisions about what you need to do. And then you start to craft on those things early on. You very, very quickly realize if it's any good, right? If there's anything in it. So that's one of the things that we do perhaps a little bit differently as 180. And one of the things that I think we brought in because it makes things more fun, and also because we can just move much faster, is to get quicker into the making and the crafting. So we spend less time up front thinking about making stuff and actually committing to something and start making it. And then as we make things, new ideas arise. But awaiting, it's like, you know, you're a musician, right?
Yes.
So let's think about writing a song. I mean, should we just get a guitar and start playing? Like, it's the same thing. You'll figure it out as you do it. And then you can have ideas that throughout this process that takes a twist and turn and makes the original idea shape to become something very different. Yeah, and that's okay too. But if you get quickly into making it, you very quickly, and forming it, it's very quickly that it becomes valuable to people. And craft, being interested in craft and being obsessive about it in one way or the other, is important, because it allows us. And so, like craft, in my mind, craft isn't just the finishing touches, right? Craft is understanding of the development process.
Yeah, the discipline itself.
The discipline itself. Yeah.
So I'm reminded of speaking briefly about writing and the written word, and if you want to become, say, someone who writes professionally for a living, not just a copywriter, but maybe a journalist, or maybe if there are just things that concern you or that you care about, anyone can open a Medium account and just write essays, or as long as they like. And the American pragmatist William James had this idea that if he didn't know what to write about, he would write spontaneously off the top of his head, and what he was concerned about would eventually emerge in this stream of consciousness. And so you could say that's the idea, right? If you want to write something, you can just do your first draft, 5,000 words, just totally off the top of the head. But that's not craft. The craft then comes from, you got to look at it, see where the ideas are, and then tighten it down to 500 words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all the same thing, really. I mean, that's really, like we talk about writing, but you also describe the process of making a beautiful statue from marble, right?
Yes.
You have a big slab and then you start to shaping it, and then the stone kind of reveals the shape inside. You might have an idea of where it goes, but the stone itself and the material, I mean, it's there, it's physical, right? And words are also physical. When you put them on a piece of paper, that becomes the body of the thing that you're shaping. And I'm fascinated by it. I think it's really that's the really exciting piece of being paid to create, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do, is that there are so many different bodies, so many different material, and so many different, I guess, if you think about it, problems that you start with, right? So a brief is a slab of marble.
Yes.
Right? And you have to kind of figure out, well, most of it, actually, what's really quite interesting is this the right slab to start with? That's also sometimes the question.
Yeah, I mean, that is always a concern. That does happen often when, say, we're in our business and we are obsessing over how to nail the brief that the client has given us. And it took a long time before we even began to have the courage to think, have we actually got the right brief? Is this the right way to begin solving this problem? And that's the question, is this the right slab of marble?
Yeah.
It was, I think Michelangelo said, and I hope he said it, otherwise I've just nicked it from a film called The Agony and the Ecstasy. Michelangelo had the idea that the sculpture is already in the marble and you're just releasing it from the marble.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he was a master, I guess. So we should. I think we should.
If we're talking about craft, it helps to listen to Michelangelo.
Yeah, and but I think also his hands and the way that he moved around this thing and the way that he looked at it and the way that the sun shone on it and his deadline was looming and stuff. So, but I wouldn't disagree with that. But I do think there's a difference between solitary creative work and trusting a group or being part of a group, and that's where it gets really exciting. And I think there's this, I guess, to me, that's a big difference. And I love working with other people. I think that's really a tremendous, like, that's the thing that, like, if being part of the creative shaping and the creative process is awesome and fun, then doing it with others is the thing that really, it's like jamming, with other people. Like, that's super fun. And just doing that is super fun. I think maybe sometimes we get a little bit obsessed with the idea that everything has to lead to something,
Yeah.
There's value in just hanging out. And I know, you guys are professional music makers and you make really great tracks and music and all that stuff. But it's also, sometimes it's just fun to just hang out and make music, I think we're very lucky if we can bring that feeling into our everyday life, into our everyday work of, like, we're enjoying making this and something will be there at the end, but the process is equally important.
So how do you foster, and this is specifically within your department at 180, how do you foster the feeling that you are going to enjoy the process as opposed to having it be an anxious scramble to quickly please the client?
It's easier said than done, isn't it? Yeah. I think it's really important to kind of realize that the work will be much better if we try to enjoy it, right? If we try to understand each other, if we walk into the office bringing in energy. If everyone walks into the office bringing in energy, then it will be an awesome win-win situation. And I think that's part of it too, being able to laugh. Again, let's create a safe environment where people feel excited about stuff. And I keep saying when we walk into the office, we haven't been into the office for like a year or something.
Yeah.
But so right now we're in the wonderful kind of branded environment of Microsoft Teams and Zoom and whatever. But I can still feel that, and I what do we do to foster it? I think it's about leadership. I think it's about listening. I think it's about being very clear about what it is that we need to get to and giving clear direction and steer, but truly empower people to internalize feedback and making it theirs and owning projects rather than just, it's just, and also realizing that some of our challenges will be the best work, will lead to the best work that we've ever done. And some of it won't. And that's okay too. And being able to enjoy both of those things. And at the end of the day, going home and having a good night's sleep because we had a good time at work. I think it's just really important. And I think we're all striving towards that and we're trying to get to that. And some days, on our best days, that's where we are. But sometimes for some individuals that doesn't happen. I can have bad days, you can have bad days, we can all have bad days. But the important thing is that when we come back to our group, that group helps me through. That group fosters. It's not about me, it's not about the creative directors, it's about us, I think. If we all bring that energy, it can happen.
That's another really that's another an issue that I'm drawn back to a lot is within certainly an agency like yours and a big agency. How do you make sure that the team are committed to creating the best work? Let's say creating the most divine work or the most beautiful without having too much of a concern about who exactly is responsible for which bit. Who gets the credit for what, where the idea started, who developed it. How do you, because those things, I think, enormously interfere with the joy of the process. How do you make sure that we're enjoying it rather than scrambling for credit?
You mean who's the lead singer and who wrote the song?
Exactly that, yeah.
what is the idea, right? I think, like I said, I think the idea often comes from the development of and the craft of it. Usually you can kind of track back to this person said that, and then, but we own it together, right? So, I mean, we do a lot of exercises where we both have small teams working on something, which is, it's them and they're doing it. And then we have things which are called five-a-sides, where we invite other people in to kind of spitball for a bit, and we make decisions in the meeting and we move. It's a great way to get out a lot of ideas on the table, and also a lot of their initial ideas that usually happens to kind of speed up the process. And then we do actually department-wide. We have bonanzas, creative bonanzas on Fridays, where we sometimes bring in quick briefs for, everyone. And that's like 40 minutes. I usually put on like Dreams or something, or another good track. You get 2 minutes to come up with ideas, and then we go through everyone. So, I mean, of course, it's incredibly important to be able to claim the work that you do, but also knowing that that idea is nothing unless it gets made by someone else, or by yourself. So I think we're good at that. I don't think it's a good environment to foster if you just say this is only about the people that was on it, and it just creates a bad atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I'm yeah.
Well, ultimately, you're serving you're always serving your patron, aren't you? You're always serving your client, and I suppose it's important to always keep what they want in mind throughout the process, instead of getting carried away with what you think it ought to be, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a balance to be struck.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are different ways to get to that. Sometimes it's very clear because you've worked with clients for a long time, so you kind of know where it's heading. But again, I like the idea of bringing in a bit of uncertainty into it. And like, it's not about, just ticking all the boxes. That would be like insurance, if you will.
Yes.
So I think we have to, like, our job is not to do exactly what people want. I think it's about listening and having empathy with their problems, and then find solutions. Again, is it the right slab, to start with? And ultimately, the people, of course, that our clients are ultimately the ones that we serve. But I think we do serve them best sometimes by challenging things,
Yes, because obviously what's the delicate way of describing the issue? If people on client side were the best people to come up with the creative idea, then it would be all be done in-house. And so there's a reason that the creative agency exists. And so I suppose the question would come down to, how do you confidently and also inoffensively suggest to the client that perhaps the idea that they think that you ought to be doing is not the idea you ought to be doing?
Well, I've been part of projects where the idea has come from the clients, and it's been great ideas. I think the reason why creative agencies exist is again to challenge the way we perhaps come up with ideas to that point, but also to how we develop them. We're very good at developing work to make it more interesting, and to understand how things move through culture and things like that. So that's part of the value that we add. Hopefully you're in a place where you can have conversations with people, clients or not, where you can just, understand why something needs to be done perhaps in a certain way, and what is it? What's the motivation behind this specific ask? Again, it's like we have to have empathy. Our empathy to create great work needs to go further than just having empathy for the people we're making it for. If you think about making it for culture, for people to make work that exists in culture and that becomes successful in culture, our empathy also has to reach, into the clients and understand how we can make them very successful and make their companies and their product, hit it off as well. So yeah, I don't know if that's answering your question. I really think it just comes down to, again, it's just about creating trust and having empathy for, you know, and uncovering the black swans, if you will, that make work, the things that are behind the ask, you know. And sometimes it's really straightforward and other times it's not. Most clients are really interested, I feel, in making great work, and they're really interested in pushing the work, and then the question is, you know, should maybe be about if you don't have the same sensibilities or the same ambitions. But then I think it's our job as an agency to understand the sensibilities and the ambition of our clients, you know.
Yes.
And then push them from where they are rather than pushing them from where we are.
Yes.
That's the difference, right?
Yeah. Pushing them from where they are instead of pushing back against them from where you are.
Yeah, I mean, if you work at any place that deals with creativity, you're always gonna, I mean, by definition, you should be ahead of a lot of your clients, right? Because they come to you to buy something. But so you have to kind of find ways to join them where they are standing and help them perhaps look at stuff from a different point of view. And that's kind of why they ask you to do things, right? It's not just about coming up with the ideas or develop the work. It's also about that. It's about, is this the right thing to do? And the experience that we bring is, yeah, it is. And then, or it's not, you know? So I think it's quite complex, the relationship between a client and a creative agency.
Yes. It's not just like having artists for hire.
No, I mean, I think it also comes down to the client, right? How they want to use their shop, and yeah, so it's always going to be a give and take. I think the best relationships are the ones that are open, transparent, where ambitions are aligned, you know, and again, it's the work that we do inside of the agency. How do we foster a great working relationship? Is the same thing, which is we share the same ambitions. We're open and honest to each other, and we're having a good time, and we kind of have aligned visions as to what's good and what's not good, you know?
Yeah. But this is one of the reasons I was really excited to talk to you in the first place, because, you know, for the benefit of the tape, we had a little preparation call a couple of weeks back just to see, you know, how this was going to get on, and I sensed from you that you take creativity. You don't take creativity just to mean artistic expression. You take it to mean the abstract things you could do everywhere. Like you say, the way you handle a relationship with the client, you could have a new approach to that. That's a creative idea. The way that, you know, you conceptualize how to arrange the furniture in your house, that's not just, you know, not just in an interior design sense, but that's another thing that you could do differently to the way anyone else has done it. You know, I suppose what I'm saying is that there's potential to be creativity. There's potential to be creative, which we could define as coming up with novel and useful ideas everywhere, not just in, you know, the things that we already understand to be creative, like drawing and creating music and films. You know? Yeah. So I suppose that's a long preamble to say something like, how, you know, have I understood that correctly? Is that what you're always trying to do, to see a novel and useful approach to everything rather than just to think about the craft? Sometimes, you know, the wheel is sufficient. Yeah, don't reinvent everything.
That's important. And also because of priorities, right? You don't have an unlimited amount of time. You don't have unlimited amount of resource. But I find it more interesting and exciting if you look at the world and try to see it from a different perspective. You know, there's actually 180 is founded. I mean, it's founded around that idea of not the world as it is, but as it could be. And I think that's really exciting, you know, because it kind of forces innovation. It forces us to think about, can we do things a little bit differently? And sometimes that's big steps, sometimes it's small steps, but I think that step always has to be taken in one way or the other. So if creativity can be applied to anything. It's interesting when people ask you what it is that you do. It's really hard to talk about it with people that are like true academics, because they know how to like research stuff, and they know how to use these words. But applied creativity is something that sounds really interesting and good, and it's just harder to explain truly what it is. But I find often that applied creativity is again, find a framework, find the blues that works for you, and then apply it to whatever life throws at you, and then be certain that you are safe within that framework to perhaps create something new. However, this is important. There are a lot of great people out there that have already created great things. You don't have to change everything.
Yes. So it's, I suppose, encouragement to try and have a good radar for what needs updating, rather than that it's more associated with the ego, isn't it? The idea that you need to update everything.
I find, sometimes, absolutely, and there are excellent tools out there. There are excellent, the haiku. What an amazing, way of putting words together. We don't have to update that. Let's make another one, but we don't have to make the haiku more haiku-ish,
Yes.
So, and it's listen, I think a lot of creativity is just application, right? It's like we take the thing and we do something with it. So it's innovation, not invention. It's really hard to invent, like to make things totally anew.
Yeah.
It's easier to invent things in fiction, like the lightsaber or things like that. But it's harder to develop it into something real. But then again, my understanding of the lightsaber from in the hands of Luke Skywalker is the most awesome way of looking at it. And I assure you, if that was something that was come out today and I could buy it at the store on the corner, the way that I would wield it would not be as awesome. So I don't know what I wanted to say with that, but I think that application of creativity and making things doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to change everything. It's really okay to enjoy stuff, to look at something and go, wow, that's really exciting. Or you go, whoa, that really made me feel something. Yeah. And that's, I think, as a creative leader, those are the type of things that you kind of, when you're over the hump of making everything yourself, you kind of help other people find what they want to do, to be excited on others' behalf and see exciting things in the work that they do and help them find that. That's best feeling, that's awesome.
There's something there's two things that we need to branch out on. And so one is riffing on this theme of, you don't always need to reinvent the wheel, and sometimes there are perfectly good ways of doing things. Combine that with the idea that often creativity does not come out of a blissful, harmonious situation, but is actually a necessary solution to a sudden and unexpected problem. So for the last 100 years or so, it's been accepted that there's a way that you work. Everyone goes to the office together, and that's how you do the kind of work we do. And suddenly, pandemic, you can't do it anymore. You've got no choice. You have to think of another way to carry on working. Hence why we're in this Zoom and Teams revolution, which is also kind of sadly predictable, because it's just like everything that was on Thunderbirds and the Jetsons and things like this, video communication. But that's the idea, right? It's like we had to apply creativity to how are we going to carry on working last year. Yeah, and
I think we it hasn't really changed that much, though, has it? We still talk. We're looking at each other. You're really small, though, compared to what you are in real life, I guess. Yeah. And you can talk to more people and being heard. I think it's become more structured a little bit. It's interesting. I mean, I think questioning how we work is something. There are good things and bad things about that. I think the structure of the work week came from and it's the same in the Muslim world, but they have a little bit of different days. But we work 5 days a week, right? We rest on Sundays when God rested from making the world. And I was talking to someone the other day about he told me about a workers' party from the 1870s or something, and their demands was I would guess very radical for the time. They demanded 1 day of work, 1 day of recreation, and 1 day of work, 1 day of entertainment, and 1 day of rest, and then that would be the cycle. Which is, if you imagine in the 1870s, where people like went to church and like all that stuff, like that's really odd, right? That's how do you deal with that? It's really hard to structure it around other things too, if everything was chaotic. So I think that systems by design, like our work week, or going to an office, or working in a template, or on Monday mornings we have stand-ups, and whatever those processes are there to make things run smoother, you know. And then when you look at it on a really big level, like there's 365 days of a year. There's all of these things, these blues frameworks that we can riff within. It's what we do within those frameworks that I think is really exciting. And sometimes you have to really bring a sledgehammer to it, you know, and redo things. One of the things that we've done in 180, for instance, is this idea of, you know, moving quickly into making, which I feel like a lot of what we have been taught as creatives is to concept for a long time and then come and present two ideas or whatever.
Yes.
We want to get quickly to the ideas to craft them. That's different. That's not a lot of agencies don't work that way. We work more perhaps like a production company that way. And then we can, of course, we don't always do that, but it allows us to use our time to the benefit of our clients much better, because we can actually develop stuff and we can pressure test things. And
instead of going for like sort of 4 or 5 weeks on concepting and then presenting and trying again. And
yeah, I don't even know if anyone does that anymore, but like the classic waterfall approach to stuff is ridiculous, you know. I think there's been
what's the waterfall approach? Sorry.
Yeah, it's just a way of looking at like things happen after sections, and then at the end of it you have a finished product. But I think the way that we need to move. Sorry, I gotta let my dog out. Are you okay? Oh, he's okay. He has this rawhide that he's chewing on. I gave it to him so he would be quiet. No, I think it's important to like. There's no better process than when you can involve the clients early. You can have conversations about work, and you can talk about stuff rather than just present the black box and, you know, present stuff out of the blue and everything is super polished. And I feel like sometimes we stumble into that anyway because of the need of whoever. But I mean, I think we spend a lot of our time. I don't know. Sorry, I kind of got lost a little bit there in my own reasoning, but that's the whole point is don't figure out what works, figure out the framework that works for you, and then be free within that, because it will really get you to where you need to go. I think if you fight against everything, if you have to like reinvent everything all the time, it becomes a really chaotic environment. Yeah. And I think good design, again, just going back to friction, bad friction and good friction, I think good friction allows you to do things within a framework. Good friction allows you to create and be free within that, because there's safety nets around you that allows you to understand where you are in time and space, like the week, like the fact that I have a watch in my hand and it tells me I need to go home and have dinner, yes. Right? But if you fight against everything and being creative around everything, there's no like the weekend is a pretty good, invention, if you will, right? Yeah. Forces us to rest. I think we can always do things better. And that's, I guess, what evolution is about, make things better. But some things we can make them incrementally better because they're already awesome. And other things we need to throw out the window. The difficulty is, of course, if you go after everything like it's a boxing fight, you know?
Yes, if it's constantly in threat response mode, it's not the best mindset to go into things with. It presents a different type of problem. But I would like to briefly, if we can, just expand on this idea of good friction and bad friction, because I'll tell you why it interests me is because when something's really, really bad, it's really, really bad. It's poorly produced, bad craft, bad discipline, whatever. But when something's not really, really bad, but it also isn't really good, we say it's a bit too safe. It's a bit middle of the road. So It's to say that there's no friction there. And in my early days as a producer, I was constantly trying to pursue a zero friction outcome, so that, you know, your mix, let's say, has nothing that pops out above anything else. There's no dynamic range. Everything's very safe and in its box. And that sounds like it lacks good friction, you know. And so, yeah, maybe help me understand that in a design context or just more generally.
So I think fundamentally, there are two different ways of looking at it. So what I mean when I say good friction and bad friction is good friction are the things that makes you stick around for more, like a great hook or something, you know, that bass that just kicks off a little bit and, you know.
Like it does intrude on your kind of awareness, but in a good way.
Yeah, and then there's bad friction, which is just bad craft or stuff, you know.
Yeah, it kind of makes you go.
Cut out the bad friction and add the good friction. That's so you can put that on anything. That's music, that's writing, that's art, that's whatever. More generally, sorry, that's generally speaking. Then more specifically for marketing, I think unfortunately we are as an industry obsessed with removing friction because we think about optimization and we're thinking about where we're testing everything and the path to least resistance. The problem is when you're doing that, you're literally making vanilla.
Yes.
Right. So you have all of these brands that the only flavor they make is vanilla, and there's different types of vanilla, but it's still vanilla. Yeah. And most people like vanilla, but they never pick it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So that's the big difference. So I think what's important is that we really have to, and it's quite difficult because it's always to make things shiny and to make things polished. And I think people sometimes confuse the idea of polish and high craft with removing friction, right?
Yeah.
Let's go back to the statues in marble. The fact that they were super polished doesn't hide the fact that there was a penis.
Yes.
Half a meter downstairs. You know what I mean?
Which now the client would say, "Oh, can we get rid of that?"
Yeah, can you move the sandpaper a little bit down here? But the or the fact that they were, you know, fighting a dragon, or, you know, there's friction in those things because of the context or because of the story around it or because who they were or whatever, right? So friction has many different ways but friction is literally the thing that keeps us on the road. Like there's friction in the wheels of the cars. Friction is important. If there isn't friction, we would all be flying out into space. And if you look at that's of course a really kind of I guess a general way of looking at it. But at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to things to make them for someone, you know. So someone actually thinks that it's interesting,
but not for everyone.
That's where you turn into a problem. Right? Yeah. Because as soon as you need to make it for everyone, by definition, you're making it for no one because you are making vanilla and no one picks vanilla. Like, have you ever been to an ice cream? Like, let's go for an ice cream and you're there with, it doesn't matter who it is. You know, no one's going to pick vanilla.
Yeah, especially if you're on one of those great Italian places with 100 flavors.
I don't know anyone who picks vanilla, but still, if you ask people, it's the one that they dislike the least. Right? There's always a lot of other flavors that they hate. Vanilla is never on the hate list, but it's never really on the, that's what I'm going to have. So it's vanilla is a little, you know, but you don't see the ice cream shops, you know, having a huge batch of vanilla because they know that's the thing that most people don't dislike.
No, that's I think that analogy, I think we need to expand this into a piece for campaign or something and put it in trade papers, because that concept is exactly it. It's like, you're trying to open an ice cream store and one of your flavors is mint choc chip. A lot of people don't like it, which means in a sense it didn't test well. So we're going to get rid of that one. And you can start doing that with every flavor, because I find chocolate ice cream really boring. And so what you were describing there, to me, if I can try and see if I can put my own needle into it, was that you shouldn't be trying to minimize dislike. You should be trying to maximize like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really hard when you're a big global brand and, you know, across 70 markets, because all the markets have different needs, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying it's easy. I just say it's vital.
Yes.
You know.
And what's vital is often not easy, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah. I mean, some vital things like breathing is automated, so that's easy, or it should come easy. But what we do and what people pay us money to do, I guess, and what we try to help with our clients is, and that's where, like, that's a big difference between making work for global audiences, which is even larger than a say a UK audience or a Dutch audience or a Swedish audience or for the US for that matter, because you have so many more divergences of thought and mind, like people are thinking different things. So you become even more vanilla. So that's a great marketeer or a great client understands that, and a great client takes that into account. So you start to think about psychographic over demographic. You start to think about what's the thing that people like rather than what is it that we don't like. So, and it's tricky. I mean, it's tricky every time. Every time it's a new challenge, but it's also what makes it exciting, I think, and also what makes it really important to do a lot of good research up front and be really empathetic with who you're making your ice cream for in the first place, you know? And yeah.
Why are you making ice cream? If you don't lose sight of that on the way. There's probably some spark of inspiration that's important.
I mean, the interesting thing is like sometimes we spend a lot of time in the, just to keep going with this analogy of ice cream, because I love ice cream, but we spend a lot of time in the kitchen, right? We make the perfect batch of vanilla. And then we put it out there and no one buys.
Yeah, but it's like I put so much hard work into it.
They were more interested in like the 5 cent, popsicle made from homemade lemonade that the 2 7-year-olds are selling down on TikTok.
But then it's also important not to go, all right, well, now everyone likes lemonade. Let's just get into the lemonade market and make loads of that.
That's the risk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So I was hoping we could take your analogy into a musical direction, and I might get. This is a statement that lots of people may disagree with, but I'm going to go for it nonetheless. With regards to the vanilla, no one dislikes it, but very few people like it. I've sometimes wondered if the Beatles are nobody's favorite band, but everyone thinks they're the best band, if that makes sense. Everyone knows they're the best songwriters, let's say, but when asked who's your favorite band, few people say the Beatles. Now, I maybe you're going to be one of the people who say that, is the case. And obviously Noel Gallagher is certainly amongst them. But maybe that applies. Once something is so universally liked, it also then starts to decrease in its importance.
I think so. I mean, but like, listen, I think Beatles at the height of their career was very much liked, right? Because you have to think. I think you have to consider the context of everything. So I think you were either a Rolling Stones fan or a Beatles fan, right?
Yes.
Wasn't that the big thing in England?
Yeah.
And in Sweden, certainly Beatles was a huge band when they were, active. I think it's, I'm going to humor. I mean, of course, Beatles is not my most favorite band, but I think that a lot of the work that they've done as artists and as musicians has influenced some of the work that I listen to, and I think is incredible, right? So just because I don't understand the context of something or because they seem out of date doesn't make them awesome. It's really a difficult one. I saw one that is very into Beatles is, I think, did you see that James Corden when he was with Paul McCartney and
doing his carpool karaoke?
Oh my God. When they were singing, I think it was Let It Be together, and Corden was almost breaking down in tears, Yeah. Like there's something about, there's something about these guys though, like who's ever made amazing art in the past. It's like it's easy to look at them and go, but then when you're in their presence and they actually perform, there's something pretty remarkable about that.
Yeah, I had the privilege of seeing Paul Simon a couple of times.
Wow.
And one was really good. It was in a really small theatre in Manchester, the Apollo. So that that's never going to happen again. Basically, that was great. But on his farewell tour, he performed Bridge Over Troubled Water, which I think he rarely did because it was very much associated with Garfunkel's voice, the big soaring kind of soprano-esque thing. But interestingly, at the arena when he was performing, before he performed it, he described it as something that arrived in his mind rather than he created. It's like it was projected there by an external force. It was really interesting to hear that he didn't take credit for the composition of it. And I think that sometimes is, and maybe the most meaningful creative projects are the ones that you feel like you discover them as you go along rather than they come out of your, I don't know what.
Yeah, and didn't Bob Dylan say something similar, right? Where he is like an antenna or something, and he just happens to like funnel it or channel it into these amazing pieces of music.
It's the same metaphor Quentin Tarantino used for his dialogue, because he's known for his dialogue. He said exactly that. It's like holding out a radar and it comes in.
Yeah. And I think also, wasn't it Burroughs or some of those like beatnik poets, Ginsberg and those guys who were like cutting up words and rearranging them, and it just happened, right? Jackson Pollock is another one where art just happened, you know.
Yeah.
And again, you know, going back to the statue that's hidden inside of the marble, like maybe that was what he was talking about as well. I don't know. And maybe that's the case. It's interesting with these guys, and it's all of them are men, unfortunately. But not unfortunately, but it would be amazing to have other types of examples as well. But one thing that kind of speaks to them is that they're all kind of very singular, right? They're all individual. Like I know Simon and Garfunkel, you mentioned, well, he didn't do it much because there was Garfunkel, it was associated with Garfunkel's voice. They're all kind of like big egos. Like you don't hear Axl Rose, you don't hear these guys like, I'm making it with the band. But then you have someone like Springsteen who's very, I guess, reliant on the E Street Band, right? Or the band, yes. Right? Well, the E Street Band? No, what are you called?
That's right, the E Street Band, yeah.
That a lot of the making happens in the studio together, you know? I don't know. It's a really interesting, what is it? What is creativity? Where does it come from? How does it shape I think in advertising, you don't really have the luxury of thinking too much about it because you're on to the next brief, to be honest.
Yes. Yeah. But this is one of the things I was, hoping we could drill into, which is the idea of surrendering to unknown forces and not attempting to predict or measure things too much. I am endlessly fascinated by ideas that get suggested in a metaphorical form in fiction. And you mentioned the lightsaber before. And interestingly, no one who isn't a Jedi can wield a lightsaber. There's something about their particular way of thinking that makes them worthy of this thing. And similarly, I suppose, so that's an idea that's suggested. It's like, why is it the case that, you have to be a certain type of person to wield the sword? I suppose it comes up in King Arthur as well. Or even more recently, I watched Thor for the first time the other day, and it's the same idea. He's not worthy of wielding the hammer until he has proven himself responsible and disciplined. Yeah.
Well, I think we maybe it's about worth. I don't know. Are you worthy to do this thing? Is it, are you righteous? I don't know. Is it a Christian thing to start with? I don't know. But I think a lot of creativity comes from places where you've never known that they existed before. It seems really like a lot of these stories that are idolizing the Jedis or whatever it is, right? I think what they're trying to do is there's a certain type of virtues that are there and they're good. And only if you live by those are you good enough to do this thing that can help everyone else, right? So it's quite limiting to think that only the worthy can do good, or can change things. I think we've seen over and over again that it's the small gestures by normal people, like you and me or whatever, or whoever, the neighbor to a neighbor, helping someone over across the street, or just reaching for a pack of milk for someone who can't do it, whatever. Those small gestures add up to much more than the major grand things that you can do with a sword.
That's really interesting, that, because I've always, I've not always, that's stupid, but I've more recently felt like the grand stories are trying to inform you on an individual level. So, I suppose in the West, the biggest one over the last 1,000 years or so has been Christianity, and the idea is like, here's someone who's literally a god, how can you be more like them? And what I thought was a really interesting answer to your question, which was, are those stories only the reserve, or are they only intended for, let's say, these larger than life characters, these things that are like superheroes on Earth? I don't know if you saw the Pixar movie Soul at the start of this year.
Yeah.
I thought that was a remarkable riposte to that solution, saying that there is heroism in ordinary everyday life. It was trying to remind us that you're not being called upon to be a god, you're being called upon to be, cliche as it sounds, the best you can be. And I was deeply affected by that movie because as a teenager, I'd possessed that same arrogance that the lead character has in Soul, saying, it's like, no, I have more of a reason to live because I'm a musician. I've got this cool, vision. Everyone else just does normal stuff. And it was Pixar of all people saying, no, the normal stuff is more important.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary film, isn't it? It's been a bad year for a lot of things, but not for film. I think we've had time to look at new things like Soul, but also old things that remind us of good things. But the idea that I don't know what I think we all go through life looking at, like, it's tough, right? It must have been tough back in the medieval times, and it must have been tough during during the plague in London, and it's tough now, but still we managed to come through. And I think we managed to come through not because of big heroic acts by the few, but by the small things by the many, that's very important. And, just to circle back to what we said about how do you foster an environment that is, safe or good for people. I think starts with that. It just starts with realizing that it's not about who can, pull out the sword from the stone or wield a hammer or whatever. It's about us, and it's about how we interact and how we have empathy with each other. That's it.
It's really interesting that the last discussion I had, I think the last one I had on this podcast was with Hermeti Ballerin, a mother. Mm-hmm. And he was saying something very similar to you, which was that, when he and Anna got made partners there, the primary challenge was to reorganize the culture so that people primarily enjoyed coming to work. And I think it's interesting that people would not assume that you have to make that effort. People think, advertising, it's cool, you get to make art for a living, and all, it's associated with this really glamorous lifestyle, or was at one point. And then it's like, no, we have to make extraordinary effort to make sure people like coming to work.
I mean, it's one of the hardest pieces, I think, about working in advertising, creative or any other department, is that you're living a life of rejection, right? You have a worse batting average than in baseball, where the pitcher and the batter in constant fight. But you come up with so much work, and you're so excited about this stuff, and very little of it gets made. So it's like you have to. I mean, I think that's amazing that the focus is on creating an environment where people enjoy going to work, right? If more places did that and trusted the fact that we've hired all these great people out, now like make them have a good time, It seems simple, but it really isn't, because there's a ton of stuff that gets in the way of that happening. So you have to make an effort. And I think it's both about superficial things like let's have a drink, to, just having conversations with people and talk about things and being open about stuff. But it can, I don't think happiness can be designed, and I think happiness is an odd measure. But I do think that having a good time, did you enjoy today? Are you enjoying what you're doing? Rather than the result of enjoyment, which is I'm happy or whatever.
Yes.
Did you enjoy this? That's very important. The idea of when we do our work, it's not just because the work's supposed to be awesome at the end of the day and sell a bunch of whatevers. That's important, but that's only a part of it. The other parts are, did you have a good time? Did we learn a bunch of stuff? Is the client happy? Did we make money? Right? And all of those things are equally important, because it's not just a race to the best idea executed in the best possible way. That's too easy in a way, right? Because if you only have that in your mind, you're going to crush everyone around you, and you're going to it's going to be hard to run a company that way. You have to, and I guess that's the word, the C word, culture, right? Some companies have figured it out, others haven't. And it really just comes down to, I think in the end of the day, it's just, let's have a shared ambition. Let's do awesome things with people that are awesome, and let's trust them to be who they are,
that trust thing, that trust again, that comes up in the sort of fictional works, mythological stories we were talking about earlier. This idea continually returns that there still has to be an element of faith. You still have to be able to leave some things in the hands of the unknown. So again, going back to Star Wars, at the end, it stays with us forever that Luke cannot hits his target unless he actually turns off his targeting device and actually gives himself over to, destiny. And for some reason, we all remember that and we have no idea what it means. But it's like, stop obsessing over trying to make sure you can't fail. Yeah. Again, the same thing happened in the final Batman film with Christian Bale. He had to make the jump across a very, very large fatal gap without a rope to save him in order to do it.
Yeah. I mean, And when you say that, I saw that scene, the Star Wars one in front of me, and it's incredible how great filmmakers and great novelists or whatever it is. Novelists, you have the film playing in your head, but with the film as a reference, you can't unhear it. Like I keep thinking about do 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 do. The way that the soundtrack takes a turn for kind of solitude. Right, it's the one instrument kind of version of the theme, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, with the French horn where you've got Ewan McGregor in the distance.
And it's just the one instrument to carry the orchestra, to carry the world. And if this one instrument, one false note or one breath missed or one beat off, you're screwed, right? Then the world will explode and everything will die. But thank God for people that have big lungs and can carry through, right? And trust themselves I think it really comes down to we have to just trust ourselves. When we trust ourselves, we can enjoy together. And it's okay to I think when I say we have to trust ourselves, I don't necessarily think that we have to have great self-confidence and not have imposter syndrome, because who doesn't, right? But I think we just have to trust ourselves that we're safe in this environment to be who we are. And that's how we can enjoy things. If we're constantly hiding, or if we're constantly trying to be something we're not, then it's very difficult to enjoy the moment. Even a thing like this, a podcast like this, right? We're sitting here having a conversation. I'm worried about how do I look? What's the things that are coming out of my mouth? Do they make any sense? And some of them will and some won't, and that's okay. I think. I think most, hopefully most will. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Are we enjoying this? I think that's so you mentioned before the conversation we had before this, right? A couple of weeks back. And I think that was the important thing is let's enjoy this conversation. It's an hour of our time or whatever, and we can't get it back, but we can make something really useful by it, by having a good time and talking about stuff that kind of matters, music and creativity and things. And that's a way to enjoy it, right? But we couldn't have done it if we walked in with helmets on and
a script,
and bullet points and rehearsed kind of way of going after it. I've always loved just riffing stuff. That's why I've always been terrible at going up on a stage, and doing like a 20-minute presentation. I just don't feel comfortable with that setting. And it's also not forgiving. Everything is on you, the spotlights, you have an audience. But, one day I will. One day I'll do it, and then it's going to be good, because I'm going to be more comfortable in doing it.
That's it. And, comfort is the main thing. And I think, as is the case with this podcast, there's an illusion that there's a way to do it. That sounds facetious. But people are often surprised by how well this venture is going. And I'm not surprised, but not in an arrogant way. Not to say it was destined to be very, good and very meaningful for the people we talk to. It's because of the fact that there's no script. It's because we turned off the targeting computer. And when we were first concepting it was at the start of the lockdown last year, because we needed something to do because the work was starting to disappear. And so I said to Hugh at Mullen Lowe, who helped me out with the name of it, amongst other things. I said, I don't want to give it a structure. I don't want it to be about, I'm going to talk to this person about this thing. And there was a pushback saying, well, then it's just going to be flabby conversation. But, people are more engaged when we're just feeling our way through it together, right? And I think the same could apply to the public speaking thing. I think we always imagine I've got to have a 20-minute script, and what if it's not 20 minutes? It's, it's possible to free associate and for that to still go somewhere. I mean, that's what we've been doing for the last, few million years. So.
Yeah, and I think some people are excellent at it. They're incredible. They love it. It's the best thing ever that's ever happened. And as an audience, you sit there and you go like, oh, wow, the TED way of doing things and just gripping an audience with this amazing insight is fantastic, and I'm sure they're enjoying being up on the stage, and some are terrified.
But if you do it without a script, it's more like a high wire act, right? It's more like watching someone on the tightrope, because you could get lost and then suddenly you get stage fright and where was I? But the great ones are the ones who can do it without the net.
Yeah, and I think this is super interesting. Just sitting and talking to people about stuff is really interesting, and it's kind of low investment in a way because you can just be yourself, and that's fantastic. And then of course you have the big stuff where you go up and you do a presentation or whatever, and that's all about being prepared. You really, really, really practice and think about what you want to say so it makes sense. And that's also why writing is interesting, because you can prepare all your thinking and it flows, and you can edit and you can make it perfect. But there's a rawness in this forum, right? There's a rawness in not knowing that we're recording, and there's a rawness of having a dog chewing a bone, and
there's a good friction.
There's good friction, yeah. And not to say that what's been, I think that what's been designed properly, a speech or whatever, can also have a lot of friction. But personally, the intimate setting of a conversation, I've always hated birthday parties, for instance. I've always enjoyed dinners, where people can sit and have conversations with others around the table. But parties where
designated happiness.
Yeah, it's difficult.
You have to celebrate today.
Yeah, it's difficult, and I think this is maybe another thing. This doesn't feel that different from what we do at work. When we're having conversations with our, in the teams about the work, or when we have the big meetings on Fridays where we're sometimes 40, 45 creatives talking, and we're talking about our work, we're talking about our weeks, we're talking about the one thing that made this week awesome, or whatever it is, whatever the question is that we're bringing up on Friday mornings. Tomorrow morning, for instance, we have because this is recorded on a Thursday, so tomorrow morning we're going to do a big brief, and just 5 minutes of everyone's time, just come up with one or two ideas. It's really fast, and it's super fun. And then everyone, that's, I think, how do you nurture something rather than how do you foster something, right? Is by repetition and by providing the safe space over and over and over again. It's not about what you do, it's the context that you provide, I think. Right?
Not about what you do, but the context that you provide.
Yes. So I think fostering great kids, or fostering anyone, fostering great friends, fostering great friendships rather, or fostering great relationships with anyone, is about the safety you provide for them to be themselves, right? Yeah. Not what you tell them what to do. It's not about... Yeah.
Well, I was interested in something that's interested me for a while, is because you said it's now my short-term memory is getting worse because I'm getting older, but
tell me about it.
I know, right?
I can't even remember the question you asked. Well, what did he say again?
Well, it doesn't come across, but I suppose you were talking about letting people be who they are.
Yes.
And one bit of tension I find interesting at the moment is the relationship between, people's essence and discipline. What I mean by that is, especially at sort of in creative training, in art schools and such at the moment, I feel like there's a bit of an emphasis on be who you are don't worry about constraints and disciplines and what people have already established, which you could argue for, saying what we said before about if you know where you're going, it's someone else's road you're walking down. But then at the same time, you know, as we said, you need the constraints and you need the discipline. And I worry that there's maybe a little bit too much of an emphasis at the moment on just be you and don't let anyone tell you what to do, and not enough of an emphasis on learning the craft and the discipline, and, you know, how you balance those two things.
Yeah, I haven't really come across that, I think, with the, I guess that's the beginning, right? When you walk into a school and you determine that I want to go into a career within this specific field or whatever. Like, what do you need? What's a good launch pad? I think it's a really interesting question. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think if we can teach people to be open and empathetic and curious, and rather than just saying you're the best, your idea is the best, stick to your guns. Yeah. That's the recipe for disaster, I think, if that's what's happening. Because when you're in for a rude awakening, you know, you walk into an environment where it's all about collaboration and trusting the group to be better than the individual, you know. And I think maybe what they're doing then is what they're saying is you should trust that you have value to bring to the table. And that's awesome. You know, I think if we can teach our newcomers to understand that actually the perspective that you bring is much more important at that time in your career, the freshness and the openness and the empathy of just starting out and being really curious about how you can add your specific and individual and unique way of thinking about stuff. Obviously, you're not going to be great at craft at that time. You're going to be in the beginning of something. I mean, if we can teach people that, or at least allow them to think like that, then we have a lot to gain. Because I think so you're going to go into the next school, which is going to be the first agency you work at or the first place you work at, right? And they all have different ways of doing stuff. And you never stop learning. You're always going to be in school. So you mentioned yourself as a young musician, you know, thinking that perhaps the way that what you did was really important because of you were a musician, etc. I mean, I think I was also very cocky in my early days, and sometimes probably can still be. But my kids take me down very quickly, so I get over it. But I remember when I worked at Wyden, and my first week at Wyden, you walk in and you think you're really good because Wyden hired you. And then you realized, holy shit, I'm at Wyden and everyone's so much better than I am, you know? That's a really interesting, I think it's important to believe in yourself that you can do something, because otherwise you become paralyzed. But I also think it's just being open to that other people are most likely better than you are.
Yeah,
and that there's a lot to learn, you know. If
you've just jumped into a big pond, yeah. But you're articulating, I suppose, the difference between potential and reality. It's like you should be aware of your potential. That's a good thing. You have lots of potential, but don't confuse that with something that already exists. Like your potential is what makes you amazing, and you don't have to do anything to realize it.
Listen, and I think that's tying back to like jumping around to when people leave, they get frustrated. Maybe their idea about who they are doesn't kind of click with where they are in the agency or in the environment that they find themselves working in. And people think that they are at a different level, but most of the time there's going to be a day-to-day and the way that the machine works within any workplace, right? That you come in, you work, you prove yourself, you gain the trust of people around you, of your clients, and then you grow in that. And if you don't give that time, so that's one of the things. If there's one thing that we can say is to like have patience, have as much patience as you can muster, you know, and it's it really isn't revolving around your opportunity to do the best work. Like that's not going to be the thing in the beginning.
Yeah.
So. I mean, you're super lucky if you can do amazing work and come out swinging. That's awesome and good for you. But for most people, that's not the reality. The reality is that there's going to be a lot of learnings, you know, and stuff. And that's, again, it comes down to like, if you buy that and you realize that, then you can actually start to enjoy that. Like, it's really interesting, this thing that I've never experienced before. Rather than, you know, I didn't get my 15-second cut exactly as I wanted it or whatever, you know. And it's two different approaches to life. And I think one really leads to not enjoying so much, perhaps, and the other one leads to a greater understanding and more enjoyment. And it took me a long time to figure that out, to be honest. It's really hard to, and I think a lot of creatives and a lot of people, and I don't know about you, but the idea that what you have to say perhaps isn't as good as someone else is tough, right? Or what you make isn't as good as this other person. And then sometimes you will be the one who makes the best thing. And I think you have to realize that it's moving a little bit like this as well. And it's ups and downs and it's the tough life, I think. And as a creative, coming into the creative advertising and trying to be creative, like the definition of what we do. And so that's another thing. I think people that have a title as creative or a creative art director, a creative copywriter, I think we're all creative, right? It might be called the creative department, but I think focusing on a craft and being good at that craft as a writer or as an artist, then you can be doing other things as well, but you have one thing that you're trying to get to, because that's the thing that's your key, that's your tool, that's your way to express yourself, right? So that's important. I think craft's important. There's been a lot of people that I think show ideas and show work that are like post-it note creatives, you know. They just like, wouldn't it be cool if we had a duck and we set it on fire and we threw it out a window and then we take out the fire with the product, and you go, what?
Yeah.
And maybe, yeah, and there's a lot of just free form jazz also that sounds like crap.
Yes.
You know, that shouldn't have been recorded. And I think the equivalent is that most of the stuff that we do that just is free form or free flow or whatever in our creative process isn't good, and it shouldn't be. It's like creative air. It's there. And that's what, for instance, getting to a 5-a-side where you quickly get those ideas out on the table quickly. You do a huge creative bonanza with a lot of people coming in, is to get that hot air out of the room so we can get to the things that's hidden behind it, you know, quicker. So maybe the post-it notes and the creatives that work on post-it notes, the ones that are the creative. I am a creative at the creative agency, and I don't really know how to art direct, and I don't really know how to write. That's really difficult for them, I think, because we're not. And I think maybe the difference is also between agencies. Some agencies have big studios where you, as a, you know, you can stand behind someone else who's doing the work, and tell them what to do. But most places aren't like that, and I don't think that luxury is going to be around much longer. I think you have to be a maker. I think you have to do things. You can't just come up with ideas and post-it notes and have other people do it for you.
Why do you think that's not going to be around for much longer?
Well, I think just because of efficiencies and just because of pressure on money and whatever from clients, is that the more resilient organizations you can create with people that are doing things and making things and not having to rely on other people making things, it's just going to be more efficient organizations. And you're also going to have more fun, I think. So
I see what you mean there, actually. Yeah, if you are the conceptor, but you can't draw, so you have to get someone else to draw the concept. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't say, if you're just, I have a great idea, I need other people to make it, or automatically that's two people not doing the job of one necessarily, because there are people who can create great ideas without being able to execute them, but they're few and far between. Yeah.
And it's really tough, I think. So the schools that perhaps are focusing more on just like creative thinking and stuff, I think that's okay, as long as you kind of understand that the application is important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and execution and craft is important. You have to be interested. And then not to say that writing and art direction is the only way to go. There's a lot of other ways to be creative or to craft your creative. But yeah, I think that's the only. I guess that's the only thing that I've seen from the schools that are coming out. Less so about people thinking that they're, we haven't really hired people that think that they're so important and all that stuff. So we haven't really seen much of it. But I have seen quite a lot of people who have, half-baked ideas, but plenty of them. And the way that the schools work is more about just coming up with stuff rather than applying it to real life situations. So hence you get setting fire to a duck and throwing it out a window. It's got no relevance to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's we've done about an hour and a half here, and as ever, as is always the case, Cal, there's about another 4 or 5 hours left in the tank. We could easily go on for much longer. I am crossing my fingers that when international travel is a bit less risky and is a bit more, possible, that we'll be able to come over to Amsterdam. We'll do this thing for real in the real room. We'll see how the discussion changes when you don't have the perils of the internet to contend with, because that's one thing that this new way of working might have done for us. We'll see what changes back to the status quo afterwards, but it may have taught us to listen a little bit better, because as you can see from these conversations, as is happening right now in front of us, it has to be turn-based to some degree. It's much more difficult for me to read when you are about to say something and stop so you'll say it. There's a slight time delay, there's a bit of hesitation on both sides, so I'd be interested to see how this would be different in the room.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult, right, to jam when we're this far away. Yeah, I'd love that. I think that'd be super cool. You have to hit us up if you come and hang out, and we can do it all over again.
Yeah. We figured out that it's cheaper for us to get to Amsterdam than it is to get to London from where we are.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where are you then?
We're in Manchester, and so a train to London's about 80 quid, and we found out a flight to Amsterdam is less than that.
And absolutely. I mean, why don't you guys come over? We'll have a gas.
Yes, we'll certainly do that. But we'll see what happens in the world between now and then. Obviously, you are not at liberty, or not obliged to discuss anything that's sensitive. But have you got any thoughts about when 180 will be returning to a more traditional way of working, more in person, or what the future holds for your department?
I mean, I think it's just. We're just looking at. I mean, I don't think the Netherlands is in a great state yet to do that. I think it's just about when it's safe and the numbers are down and we're starting to get back in. I think people are excited about it. Some people will have more hybrid work kind of schedules than others, and other people will be more into the office. Like I said, we have a lot of people that don't have family here and are from other places and can't wait to get back into the office, etc. And if anything, I think a lot of people who wanted to try to work from home have had their share now, and would love to be back into the office. We have a few people that are vital, that has to be in to do things that can't be done from elsewhere. But besides that, we're really trying to just be really mindful about it. I mean, it's really better to be safe than sorry, right? And I think we've been figuring this out pretty well over the past year. It's just, I have to say, it's getting a little tedious, and I really miss people. It's like it's your friends and your people. If you're not around your people, then
I mean, there is a poignant statement, there's a poignant statement in there, isn't there? Insofar as, often you say, I miss you to an individual, I miss you specifically, but there's a far more sort of bittersweet connotations of saying, I miss people, just as a whole.
Yeah, I do miss people. Yeah, but I also miss my people.
Yeah.
It's interesting because there's a distinction, right, between, I think we have really strong culture at 180, and I think we've grown quite a lot in the past year, actually, during this pandemic. And it's a lot of people that we've hired that never experienced that. They've never experienced our office or what it's like to be in the office or to go on a Friday after work together, or to, that hasn't. And to me, that it's really, relationship with 180 is different from everyone who's ever worked there. So it's going to be super cool to see what they bring with them, and how we are going to evolve as a culture, retaining what's awesome, but also kind of getting to a place where new perspectives add to the old.
It's funny. There is going to be a lot of relationships that were established, as you say, over video calls during this pandemic. Yeah. And then, you're going to meet people for the first time, and it's going to be unusual because they're going to be taller than you expected, or shorter, or something that is not always in the same. I've never seen you from profile, for example, sideways. Oh well, there it is. That's silhouette right there. So we'll screenshot those so everyone knows what Cal looks like in profile. But it's going to be weird, and you can already imagine some cliched idea coming out for an advert for a bank, probably, or something like trying to dramatize the moment that people come back into the office and all marveling at each other. But I think the real thing's going to be good.
Yeah, I think so too. Sorry, my dog is starting to get it. You can say hi to him here. I have to pick him up because it's.
Today we're having a gas with.
Wants to go outside now.
What's the dog called?
This is Louis.
We're having a gas with Louis as well.
Yeah. Louis, he's upset about something. He's hearing some noises outside, so I had to pick him up. Yeah, he's also. I mean, he used to be in the office a bit, and now he's been home for a year. It's going to be really interesting to see. We've been in a few times, and he's been having quite a good. He really likes being in the office, and that's the other thing, is that we had like 8 dogs already, and I think there's been quite a few additions to those 8 dogs that were already there. It's going to be chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it'll be interesting to see who's become parents in the pandemic as well, right? How they've changed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, but at the end of the day, I think this has been a really upsetting year, but it's also been a really interesting year. And Louis, please, trying to have a conversation. He's like growling at something outside. Is there someone out there I should know about? And it's probably just in the stairs. But it's been a really difficult year, but it's also been a crazy awesome year, because I think we've done something we haven't done before. Again, it's like we reinvented. You mentioned it in the beginning. It's quite similar to what we've done, but we've also reinvented it. But we haven't we've innovated on our approach. We haven't really radically changed. I think I think we have become, to your point, more. It's been simpler to get your voice heard because of this, the back and forth and the giving each other the room. But I feel also like it's been more rushed, because this meeting ends in 5 minutes, and you have to oh crap, I haven't had time to go through all the work or whatever. So it's going to be nice to be in a place that's a little bit more fluid and not so boxed in by a schedule and then another box that you jump in with your face into,
Yeah, really strange, isn't it? How, I mean, it's another constant of technological development, which is we build things to make, we design tools to make things easier, and what they do is they free up a load of headroom, and then we fill the headroom. So it's like this Zoom thing means we can have 10 meetings a day rather than 5. Yeah,
it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, what's that thing that they're saying is it's gone from work from home to live at work?
Yes, brilliant.
So I think, I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a little. This used to be my, a place where we kept some clothes in or something, and now it's where I do my, do my daily Zoom calls or whatever, and it's it's such a weird. It's weird, I have to say, but so it's going to be fun to come back. It's also just the energy. Like, again, it's the singular versus the group, right? So I think what I miss is the dynamic of the group as well. Just that constant changing in other people's energies, because we are only as good as other people, we're only as good as the people around us. Yeah. And I mean, I feel sorry for, some days you just wake up on the, and you're just like not awesome or whatever, you're not feeling it. And when you have great people around you, those days are easier. When you don't, or then you have to really try like this to enjoy the time that you have, rather than just putting pressure on you on a deadline or ticking boxes of what needs to be done. Again, I really think it's about trying to enjoy. And I think we've learned a lot in the past year about how to enjoy this. This is what we have right now. We have to enjoy this. It's almost like, on Netflix, I don't think they have that anymore, but or on any of the streaming devices where you can put on like a fake log fire. It's a little bit the same. It's not the real, but it kind of feels good, anyway.
Yeah.
I don't have a fireplace, so I'm going to put that on. It's Friday night after all, it's going to be a little cozy. It's raining. But so this is instead of, but I'd rather have this than not. Imagine if this would have happened 30 years ago and we would have been like, hello, let me just dial you up.
Yeah.
And then we can have a conversation. I'll send you a letter, handwritten. Maybe the fax machine is out of paper. So it's just, I think we're blessed to be where we are in the technology and this happening to us now. You know, I think it would have been really difficult 20 years ago.
I think you're right.
30 years
and
ago.
I think, well, it's going to be interesting to see what the world is like the next time we are speaking.
Yeah. Well, let's do that. Let's make a date for that.
Let's definitely do that. Yeah, absolutely. Cal Helden, the Chief Creative Officer of 180, the most, what is it, Amsterdam's most famous, something like that. It's the, the agency to beat in Amsterdam. Everyone wants a piece of it.
But at least we're enjoying stuff.
Hey,
we're having a good time.
You say at least, but can you do more than that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think Amsterdam, as in general, is a good place to be at. I talk to a lot of people who are interested in moving abroad or whatever, and I think Amsterdam, there's a lot of great agencies here, and 180 or not, this is a great place. It's the birthplace of liberalism, the birthplace of capitalism, the birthplace of a lot of cool things, and it's just an amazing place for creative people that want to do great stuff. So I tell to everyone, even if we don't have the doors open to hire, you should definitely check out Amsterdam and the agencies here as well. Or Manchester here is really good too.
It's good and it's getting better. So yeah.
There you go.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. I look forward to the next one, and likewise. I hope you have a great day.
You as well.
Cheers, Cal. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.